Here's devotion 734. Hey, I'm Jesse. Let's have a devotion. It is so vitally important to have a good working knowledge of history. My history teacher in high school, Mr. Creighton, said, this class is more important than math. This class is more important than language arts. This is the most important class that you have. Because forgetting what you learn in math, okay, that could result in some consequences, but it's nothing that a calculator can't fix. Forgetting what you learn in the language arts, will get you a bad grade in the language arts and may hurt your ability to communicate. But forgetting what you learn in this class dooms you to experience it. The Persians had a really short memory. This is Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. Darius decided to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom stationed throughout the realm, and over them 3 administrators, including Daniel. These satraps would be accountable to them so that the king would not be defrauded. Daniel distinguished himself above the administrators and satraps because he had an extraordinary spirit, so the king planned to set him over the whole realm. This is the favor of God at work in Daniel. Daniel is living an exemplary lifestyle. He's also using his gifts. He was 10 times better than everybody else at his job, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were. And when you're using your spiritual gifts, right, you'll notice that he had a unique spirit. He had an extraordinary spirit. Wow, the favor of God's just going to pour out on you. You're using your spiritual gifts and your talents and your abilities in accordance with your calling at your timing. This is going to happen. It can't help but happen. And it's not because you're so awesome. It's because the God who gifted you is great and he's faithful. He's good. But you'll notice this is probably familiar. Any of you have been paying attention. We're now under the second king of Persia. Daniel has been in prominence from the Babylonian captivity under Nebuchadnezzar, and now the first king, King Cyrus, and then the second king of the Persian Empire, Darius. This is Xerxes' dad. This is the father of the king who is in power in the book of Esther. So Daniel is over the guys who are over the guys, and then Darius plans to put him over the guys who are over the guys who are over the guys. But his peers don't like him. The administrators and satraps, therefore, kept trying to find a charge against Daniel regarding the kingdom. But they could find no charge or corruption, for he was trustworthy, and no negligence or corruption was found in him. So they're evaluating him according to the standard of their context, the kingdom. Okay, so it says regarding the kingdom. So they're looking at his life as, an official and his adherence to the laws of Persia, and he is squeaky clean. So they resort to the ad hominem attack. They're going to try to find a way in which he's a hypocrite. Then these men said, we will never find any charge against this Daniel unless we find something against him concerning the law of his God. Now, this is something that persists to this day. All right, it's not entirely uncommon when you do speak up, you do act when God prompts you to. You're unashamed of the gospel, even though you're surrounded, you're outnumbered, you're bold. Like Esther, you stand, you speak. There may be those who resort to an ad hominem attack. Having wholly disregarded the law of God their whole lives, they'll suddenly think it true and they'll try to task you with it. Now, this is logically fallacious because Christian hypocrisy has zero effect on the legitimacy of the gospel. If the whole world stinks at math, guess what? Math is still true. If the whole of the modern church fails to accurately live out the Christian lifestyle, the gospel is utterly unassailed in its validity. Moreover, it's logically fallacious because it's hypocritical. It's hypocritical to point out someone else's hypocrisy because you're presupposing that hypocrisy is a bad thing. You're like, hey, you don't live up to a standard. But by what standard are you saying that's a bad thing? You're presupposing your own gospel. Perhaps your gospel permits hypocrisy. In which case, why are you pointing out somebody else's? And if your hypocrisy is a bad thing within your own worldview, you're definitely presupposing something that's consistent with the word of God. If you're going to be consistent with God, look at your own life. Jesus said, take the plank out of your own eye before you go one-on-one to your brother or sister about the speck that's in his or her eye. Paul said that by using such judgment against one another, you confess your own hypocrisy. So that's the trap that's being set for Daniel. So the administrators and satraps went together to the king and said to him, may King Darius live forever. All right, this is a benedictie, similar to the way that Esther would address King Xerxes. All the administrators of the kingdom, the prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an edict that for 30 days, anyone who petitions any god or man except you, the king, will be thrown into the lion's den. So the lion's den wasn't Darius's idea. Like father, like son, these guys just kind of these Persian kings tend to go along with whatever their advisors suggest. Moreover, the plot becomes a little bit more clear. It's not so much an attack on Daniel, trying to find a way in which he's a hypocrite according to the standard of God. They're going to try to make adherence to God's law illegal. Do you see this? See this manipulation? Because it's happening today in America. All right? Regardless of how well you adhere to it, if they can make Christian worldview illegal, if they can frame anyone who believes the Bible as an extremist, right? That is what's happening in the book of Daniel, and that's what's happening today, now, in our culture. This is not so ancient after all, is it? Therefore, your majesty, establish the edict and sign the document. As a law of the Medes and Persians, it is irrevocable and cannot be changed. So Darius signed the written edict. Now, all of this happened just one generation before the events of the book of Esther. And the same exact thing happens in Esther. These guys had a terribly short memory. They neglected history. Modern day culture does the same thing. We have a really short memory. In the context of Daniel, you had these satraps and administrators who hated Daniel, the Jewish man. And so they go to the king, Darius, to have him outlawed. In the book of Esther, you've got Haman, who hates Mordecai, and so he goes to the king, that's Xerxes, in this case, to actually annihilate the whole Jewish people. This is only a generation later. This is only a few years later. I've got my study Bible open with some dates in it. Darius reigned from 522 to 486 BC. Xerxes reigned from 486 to 465. This was not that long ago. Okay, their reign of succession, happened in 486, and just one generation later, just one administration later, the same exact thing happens over again. Have not a short memory, and don't fail to instill in your children the importance of the gospel, because you will fight this fight in your workplace, in your culture, in your context, and then our kids will take their turn. And if memory serves, memory will not serve the lost culture. So remember history.